Good afternoon, councillors. Continue our very busy day and declare the Infrastructure Emergency Management Committee open. Welcome everyone here today, including Lorraine and David. Thanks for attending, Dave. Any apologies? We have got, Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A potential apology for early departure at around 3 p.m, needing to go to the funders.
And I'll be the same, maybe an early departure.
And a 5-minute apologies for Councillor Brian, who's on the screen, and Councillor Ali, I think, is probably there too. Okay, there. Oh, yes, absolutely right. And councillors and others, just to remind you, this meeting's being recorded too today. Thanks for that. So can we have a mover and seconder for Sharon and Ms. Facey for apologies? All in favour? Aye. Thank you very much. Public forum. Nobody's been notified as being here, so we'll move on to that. Notifications of any items on the agenda, not on the agenda. All clear there. Any conflicts of interest to be declared? None there. So we'll move on to confirmation of the minutes, councillors. If we can have a move and a seconder that they be received. Councillor Scott, Councillor Noma, all in favour? For that, we'll flick through those, councillors. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Everybody happy with those, so thank you for that. We'll move on to the first major item on the agenda, which is, I think, the management report. So we'll move on to item 7.1, councillors, the management report. Are you wanting to handle that, Raj, or is Brian? How would you like to handle that? We can probably almost go through it. Raj, and then page and any questions.
I agree with you, Chair, and I think we've got Roger here and John as well, so allow the staff to actually talk about sections in their report. They may as well.
Right, councillors, we'll go through the infrastructure management report and we'll just take questions as we go for whoever's able to handle it, if that's okay. So we'll start at page 13, councillors. You'll be, obviously we've been informed about our new appointment of the group manager, which was very exciting. And I think, I'm not sure when that appointment's taking place. Raj, have you got some idea of that? The appointment of group manager for infrastructure? Oh, sorry, no, Brian's. Good, so it's good. So page 14. Councillor Sharon.
Just a positive comment. I was delighted to see the amount of work that's gone on with unblocking culverts. I know it must be a dead boring job and very unexciting, but the long-term implications for helping us deal with other issues is so just a commendation to the team through you, Chair Kerry.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm sure that'll be well received, actually. There's been a lot of work going on looking at this particular part of the report, really, isn't it? So we'll go to page 15, councillors. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to have a look at section 5.3 waters 5.1 and in particular the Eketahuna wastewater treatment plant. Having a look there, looking at the two options, but just wanted some more information on the significant land risk that have been identified with the primary concerns of road access and site flooding. And I guess just wondering if this has, why is this presented or come up now rather than earlier in the processes and before we purchased the land?
Thanks, councillor Scott. Is that something you?
So I don't have the background with me. So I don't know if Brian's able to assist with that question. Or anyone else, but I'm sorry, I can't help.
No,
Yes,
you've got- Sorry, Brian, are you able to answer this, Brian?
No, not really. Just that this has come up recently, and we don't know why it's been addressed, but it could be that the consultant that is working on this, that has addressed it, wasn't involved in those earlier stages, but as Roger said, would need to look into why. I think what we are doing though is just having another look at that advice in terms of what can be done in that area, so effectively a peer review.
You able to add that, Dave?
Just a quick comment. I was at the meeting and they were talking about the access way getting in the driveway from Bridge Street with a truck or a truck and trailer. I don't know if you've been up there, but there's that little house on the right-hand side and the trees on the left-hand side. I think it was just the access way of getting in there, but whether they can cure that with trimming a few trees or moving the fence or something, I think they'll may need to do a little bit of homework on that. But that was the initial, I think it was just the initial discussion from the consultant on getting in that slim driveway with big vehicles.
Thanks, Dave. We'll move on to page 16. Councillor Scott?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I definitely wanted to have a bit more of a discussion and hopefully find out a bit more information on 5.2, which is the report disruption to the Eketahuna water supply. Now, with this one here, I had emailed the CE a couple of questions and absolutely appreciate Brian hasn't been well, but quite keen to dig into this a little bit more. This has obviously been a pretty big disruption, and it wasn't the first disruption that had happened. So a couple of, I guess, further questions I have in the report that's been provided, and I'm very grateful for the information that's there, is really around the communications piece, around the procedures that we have. If a resident calls up and notifies us, even if it does go to our after hours support, that they have an issue, what are our procedures to make sure that we get someone on site straight away? I note that calls were received and an operator didn't attend until the next morning. So I guess what I'm looking for this is, do we already have procedures in place to cover that? And was it human error? And if that's the case, that's okay if there was learnings from it. Or do we need to review our procedures? And if so, have we?
Thanks for that, councillor Scott. Shall we perhaps start with you, Roger? You've got some info on this issue?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it was human error. And the initial notification that came through via computer or the alarm wasn't investigated. So we have changed our SOPs. And so if an operator is advised that there is no water or low pressure, if that comes through, then they must now attend the site, not just look at what's on the computer, what the computer's doing. So that change has been made.
Tracy.
Chair Kerry, can you confirm for me that our after hours service, if they get water calls like that, they do pass all of those on? I know we've changed our operating procedure, but are they making sure that they're notifying when it's concerning water with any town? Find the operators, thank you.
My apologies.
No, that's fine. So when after hours receive a call saying that there is a lack of water or something's going wrong, is it in their operating procedure that they must contact one of the members of our water team?
My understanding is in the first instance, they contact Downer and then Downer would normally contact us. So theoretically, there should be two ways that that information is received, one through the alarms, through the system, through the electronic system, but also from Downers. I'd have to confirm if they independently contact the Three Waters team as well. But in this case, I know they did go through Downers. So the initial reports went to Downers and Downers investigated and then it came to the Three Waters team from Downers.
Just before Councillor Scott, Raj would like to make a comment.
Through your chair, I just add to what Roger's right in the sense that we do have what you call a contact list with after hours. They do know the fault and who to contact as a first point of contact, and that's what they tend to do. And I think what we could do as part of this process, Roger, is just to revisit the contact list is updated. And we tend to do that. It's not based on a specific person, but a function and role. So we make sure that even though the staff would move on, they know who to contact. So we have a contact list, and that's the escalation process that we have.
Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just my next question on this is really pleasing to note that stress testing has been put in place to make sure that everything's operating as expected. Just, I guess, wanted to know, now that everything's working as expected, will we have an ongoing program of testing across all of our sites, not just in Eketahuna, to make sure that I guess the communications system and the technology is working as expected?
I'm just reading the notes I've been given. Can I get back to you on that question? If I can just verify that. We are going through a SCADA and telemetry project at the moment. So we're actually reviewing all that electronic system, so these particular devices will be picked up as part of that process. And obviously we're wanting to improve that form of communication holistically right across the district. I need to confirm around the checking of the other sites as well. So,
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
I think that's totally fine to follow up on that. And I would request that that's added into that project, that there is a system of ongoing testing. And it actually just leads me to my last request, if that's okay, through you, Mr. Chair, is this is I guess a very important issue, particularly to the people of Eketahuna. It was brought up at the last community board meeting, but actually to the wider district, because this could happen in any of our towns. So I see that you do have quite significant notes there. One thing I would request for this committee, but also for the Eketahuna Community Board, is a more fuller report to be given outlining, I guess, the learnings from this, so they can communicate that through to the ratepayers of their area. So if that's something that you could do, I'd be very grateful.
that's noted, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Councillor Scott. It has been a little concern to us, hasn't it, particularly with Eketahuna. So I think we'll take on board both the comments and the councillors will move on to onto regulatory compliance, page 17. We'll just go through those various sites. Move to page 18, councillors. Was going to ask councillors, and perhaps Dave might answer this, just in respect of Norsewood, actually. Are we continuing, Dave or Roger, at the moment, are we actively looking for alternative bore sources at Norsewood. Has that been ongoing, or are we sort of having another look at that one? If you don't, if we have.
We've recently received the report from PDP, one of the consultant companies, on the possible or on some possible alternate sources for Norsewood. But they are some distance away from the treatment plant. So there'd be quite extensive pipe work that would need to be installed. So we've now got to work out what our next step is in terms of the situation at Norsewood. We have identified, though, that we are going to need to do some work to the water treatment plant. It's not compliant. So that's something that we're looking at right at the moment.
Thanks, Russ. We flick on to let's go. Page 19, councillors, some solid waste. Sorry, councillor Kieran, I've skipped you.
It's all right. No. It's a bit of a competition to see whose pen goes up first. Under 6.2, Chair Kerry, it's flagged as read. How did Joe know I was going to ask something on this?
See first, and then we go.
Yeah, I'm just a little. I mean, it's been highlighted as red, so there obviously is a significant concern here. We're now into a 2-month extension, taking us through to a 30th September deadline. 30th of September isn't too far away, Mr. Chair. So just wondering, given the impact of all of those very special services to our waste management, how's the land looking for where we go from here with that contract?
Joe, you will answer, then Rach with the comment as well. So you want me to go first, Joe?
Through Chair, in terms of progress, in terms of services, there's a continuation of services. I think that was really important for us as we're going through and negotiating the new contract with our current contractor. We needed the time to negotiate because this is a 10-year contract in essence. We want to make sure that from a ratepayer's point of view that we land on a contract that's going to survive the 10 years with us, and that's the discussion that we're having with Smart, and we extended it to allow us the time to really look at the contract negotiation, particularly in cost, the flexibility to change. The solid waste environment changes, and we know it will change, and looking more robustly, and Joe is helping us in this space quite immensely, is looking at the performance measures, performance indicators in the procurement. So it's quite a different contract that we started off. And I think that's why it needed a little bit more time for both parties to actually land on a good contract. We're trying to make it a much more of a collaborative partnership agreement because it's a 10-year contract. There's value in us actually trying to look for the expertise that exists in Smart to see how we could do better and deliver the service better for the community. So we want to make sure the contract is structured such a way that it facilitates that collaborative work. So that's why we extended for 2 months. We are having regular catch-ups with management. We've escalated to higher management in Smart. So I'm involved in the contract together with Joe as well. So we're engaging with our counterparts there, and we're making sure that we're on track. So we are progressing well to have the contract firmed up by end of September.
Thank you. Councillor Scott, did you have a good Councillor Peter?
Gary, 6.2, the composting facility, local iwi to conduct a stage 1 case study to potentially build an organic compost facility in the district. Is there any update on that as to where would that be built?
Yes, that was merely mentioning that it is very early stage, so it's only in the very early stage of looking at it. It was more of an FYI rather than sort of hearing it from elsewhere if there was talk, commencing in regards to it. It's in line with what the mandation in a few years' time of curbside green and food waste. So we'd be silly to not look at if we could possibly do something within Tararua, and so very early stage. Just looking at the case study.
So nothing's happened yet.
Not as yet.
Thanks, Joe, for that. Page 20. Page 21. I'll just hold my ground there for a second, Roger. We didn't have a specific agenda item on the impounded supply, Roger, but you did mention at the iwi governance the other day you wanted to give us a bit of an update on the extension for work on the dam, didn't you? I think but we haven't actually specifically put it into this, but maybe at this, would you like to maybe comment at this part of this report, perhaps? We're at the stage we've got the map, Roger, and then we move on to. Yes.
No overview of the projects.
Project page and then the timeline budget. So perhaps if I just let you take the floor for those two pages there.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, if I can just add a couple of comments. We've included the graphic and essentially the table to try and summarise the information for council. Obviously, there's quite a bit going on at the moment, but we're hoping to transition to the new SODA program management system, which helps us do that. So there's consistency in terms of approach, but just for this particular meeting, we've put together these two documents. A couple of updates. Firstly, up on the or at the impound right now, we have a couple of geologists from Tonkin and Taylor and a dam team from Webster Drilling. Now they're going to drill two bores, one on the eastern embankment, at the top of the eastern embankment, and one on the western side. And those two bores should indicate if we do have any significant damage to either of the embankments, which is critical in terms of remediation. So if there is significant damage, then we will need to do some remediation to either one or both those embankments, probably not the western embankment, but definitely possibly the eastern. And so I'm hoping by the time they finish early next week, we'll have an indication as to the integrity of those embankments, and that'll be a good indicator as to whether those earthworks, those more extensive earthworks, have to occur or not. So everything's been quite encouraging up to this point. Secondly, the commencement of the remediation works has been delayed by 2 months until January 2024 for two key reasons. The first is the consent process. So the decision has been made that we will actually apply for a building consent to complete these works through Waikato Regional Council, and that adds obviously some time to that whole process, but that is the advice that we've received. It's the best and most comprehensive approach to take in dealing with this. The second delay has been caused by the peer review. So we've got a second company, Dam Watch, that are going to peer review all the design documentation, and that also adds time to the overall design process. So I've been working closely with Tonkin and Taylor, and we've tried to minimise these delays, but essentially they need another 2 months. So the intent at this point is that the earthworks contractor would, if we can get permission from Waikato Regional Council, would set up prior to Christmas. So they would be on site and all ready to go in the new year. And then in the new year, we would dewater the dam and then be straight into the remediation works. Repairing the subsoil drains would be the first key task. I've also spoken with NIWA this week, and they've indicated that we're going into, or all the signs indicate we're moving into an El Nino, I think that's correct, phase of weather, which would indicate a drier spring and summer. more westerlies and southwesterlies. So that's already happening to the north of us in the South Pacific, and they're expecting to see signs of that occurring further south over the next month or so. So with the high water table that we currently have and that indicator, we're probably set up to be the best position we can to empty the impede and to commence the works. Of particular concern is the liner. So the liner needs dry weather to allow it to weld the different pieces of the liner together. So that's a critical consideration in terms of those repairs to the dam. So that's a quick update as to where we're at. If there are any questions, Mr. Chair.
Very much, Roger. The time you mentioned the welding of the new liner. That's what you're asking. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Council, any questions with Roger's summation of where we are? Yeah, Tracy and Councillor Mike.
I think the notes that I've just made through you, Chair, to Roger, is just around early iwi engagement on that section 330, just to make sure that everybody's there so that we go together on that consent application would be great.
Thanks very much, me, Tracy. I'll just note, confirm that note.
Through you, Chair. The 5 megalitre tank, how many days storage does that have for the town, please?
Is that the current one or the one that we're proposing to?
The one that you're proposing.
So it'd have approximately 18 to 22 hours at the standard rate of consumption. So essentially we'd double the 18 hours that we have with the current tank to about 36, potentially slightly more than that, 36 to 40 hours of treated water storage.
Councillor Mike and then Councillor Steve.
So depending on climatic conditions at that time, would the town be considering water restrictions at that time?
You mean in the new year when the impound's empty? Yeah, no, definitely. We need to be preparing the community and we've started that process that there to anticipate water restrictions, depending on just exactly how the summer works out.
Councillor Steve.
You're just reiterating what you said at the iwi meeting about the bank testing, right, on the eastern side, wasn't it? And like we talked about, they're going to dig it open to get in there to do the repairs. So if that does fail, right, and then you're going to get new subsoil, new everything for that bank, which would be, if those tests fail, obviously the cost would go up quite an amount.
Yeah, the cost would increase significantly in the order of millions of dollars if we have to go, especially the full rebuild of that embankment. Yeah.
Sharon.
Obviously asking questions around the table on page 23. Roger, you've indicated there in one of the tools that we have in our little toolkit is around demand management. And you've indicated here that elected members have assumed responsibility for engaging with landowners individually. The responsibility lies with Mayor Tracy, but is there a process in hand as to how that's going to happen yet, or is it too early in the piece to tell us timing of that? And because we're going to have to make a decision on the 27th of September about it.
My understanding is that Mayor Tracy's still waiting for some documentation from Horizons, but ma'am, do you want to?
I'm just waiting for some documentation through from the regional council to understand what is in place for initially with the raw water users, and then we'll move on to the high water users. So that'll be the planned order there, and getting looking to get some metering in place because we can't manage what we don't know is being used as well. So as soon as I've got that, I've got quite a big team of councillors that have all said that they will be happy to take part in this and have those conversations. So I'm envisaging we'll start those next week.
Good questions. A fair bit going on in that area, Roger, isn't there? Just quietly. I doubt it'll get a bit more pressure as the spring arrives, won't it?
Just one,
Councillor Peter?
Um, yeah, Roger, the drilling of two additional water for the Alliance Meat Company, you say you've got a second one south of the impounded supply, adjacent to the Tamaki River. Wouldn't it be north of the impounded supply and next to the river?
It's more south. We're looking almost directly across the road from the impound in the vicinity of the river itself. So there's a second tributary that comes in above that. So the advantage or the potential advantages is one, that there'll be more water in periods of low flow to extract from that point. And secondly, because we'll be extracting from a bore, that the turbidity would be less if it was a period of high turbidity.
Yeah, the other day you had it on that.
Yeah.
I'm with you now. It's across the road.
Yeah.
We had scheduled to do some initial testing yesterday, but unfortunately it's just been too wet down there, so that's had to be delayed. But yeah, we're trying to get onto that as quickly as we can. But that is independent of what's happening at the impound supply. So there's two different groups doing this testing at the moment. Yeah, just given the sheer volume of activity.
Thanks, Councillor Peter. Yes, I was going to say, Roger, so that, yes, we were going to do the testing of by the impounded supply, but are we going to do the similar sound testing at Alliance as well? Both at the same time?
That's correct. I'll let Dave, if it's all right, I'll let Dave speak to that because he's
Yes, we did the testing yesterday with not very good results. So there was we only put two down. We did one up on the top level of Umatarua Road. We put one down and there was no, what's the easiest way to say it, activity that showed any signs of that. So they don't put another one down. They normally, if it indicates pretty good indication of it being there, they move about 50 metres away and do another one. They didn't even hesitate and not do that because you're supposed to get two, they both coincide with each other in the relationship to the readings. And then we went down below where we thought another one would be, and same thing, nothing at all. So just working through with them now, we'd probably be better to put a bore down closer to the Mangataraa stream itself, below them. So we're just working through that there with water allocation and things like that. So just on indicating what procedure, I'm just getting some prices on what that may look like in the costing side of it, and whether they put an exploratory bore down in the process. If depending on what that looks like or what the flow looks like, they could use that as the final bore. They put exploratory down, but there is a cost to those sort of things in relationship to that. So only happened yesterday. So yeah, a bit of a failure, but just got to keep moving on. So yeah, the next one is where we would look at the next exploration.
Right. Thanks, Dave. Process carries on. Further question on water, councillors? Thanks very much for that update, Roger. But
I just add one other comment? We've indicated here in the decision timeline that we'll be coming to council in next month for a number of decisions. Now, this was put together prior to the notification from Tonkin and Taylor that it will be an additional 2 months before they will have the detailed design completed. So I expect that some of these dates will slip because we're now being pushed out. But I just didn't get a chance to change this prior to it having to be completed. So just to give councillors that information.
Thanks for that, Roger. Council, that's the management report. Would somebody like to move recommendation 1.1? Councillor Steve and B Tracy, all in favour? Thank you, councillors. So I think Joe is next. Waste assessment option 7.2, councillors. So Joe, I'll leave you to lead the way with this thing.
We've got the draft waste assessment is now complete. What was sent through to you was actually since distribution has had a couple of insignificant corrections made to the document. It was more of a time frame of getting it through to you because we're on a fairly tight time frame for each segment of the process for WMMP. So the waste assessment is merely the formality. With this information, we are seeking approval to proceed with rewriting of the new waste management minimisation plan, subject to Ministry of Health's response, which we intend to have both the final waste assessment and Ministry of Health response available for the next meeting on the 30th of August, next council meeting. From there, we intend to present the WMMP action plan at September's ICCM meeting. And with legislative changes and such a high focus on minimising the waste, the WMMP is it's about documenting our future and the vision we have for solid waste and recycling for Tararua over the next 6 years, which has obviously significantly changed from the last 6 years. So.
Thanks, Joe. Malcolm, are you anything?
Chat about this?
Just this is more of a procedural item, and we didn't do this in this formal way 6 years ago. I remember because I was writing the thing, and we got in a bit of strife after that from Ministry for the Environment when they do their audit process, saying, well, "Where's your waste assessment formal documentation?" It's like, well, we did that as part of the main process, and they said, no, you must. Like, okay. Right. So, okay, it's so MFE's got these quite rigid procedural items, and council needs to adopt this waste assessment and then formally accept that we need to review and rewrite the waste management minimisation plan, and then having done that, this information provides the basis for the rationale for what you're trying to achieve in terms of the projects that are then assigned to the waste management minimisation plan. The key thing for council, apart from the fact that it drives your activity plan for the LTP for solid waste, is that the waste levy grant, which comes back to council from MFE, you can only spend that on projects and items that are approved in the waste management and minimisation plan, and so that has to line up, and that's audited by MFE. So there's actually, you'll be aware from the side of council that's suffering in terms of budget sense, the increase in the waste levy has been coming through, which has been part of the reason why the fees of charges have had to go up. We get about half of it in terms of tonnage. There's about half of that comes back to council in terms of a grant levy, a grant, the waste levy grant. And so there's actually, as that waste levy is going up quite significantly at the moment, the amount of grant money is also increasing quite significantly each year, and this year and next year. So the amount of projects you'll be able to do in the waste management plan will be able to be significantly expanded without, not rates funding from the levy. Thanks very much for that explanation, Malcolm. It's you know what you're talking about there, which is helpful to us. This is Joe. Councillor Peter.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. Thanks, Joe and Malcolm. Excuse me. Having spent 16.75 hours reading that document and making several notes, I understand that was probably a waste of time. response in the piece, and therefore I'll have, I'll move the recommendation.
Before we move on,
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you have any items that you think is not quite right or things that we need to fix up in the waste assessment, by all means, send them.
Several comments to make, but it's a discussion yet to be had.
Time is not wasted, I think, councillor, is that it'll be good, good preparation for the next month's workshop on when we're actually get into the nitty gritty of this.
Thanks. Look, I was going to say much the same, councillor Peter, that I've made a few notes, but obviously a chance to get our teeth into it a little bit later on. Might be so. Thanks so very much, Joe and Malcolm, for that. So we've got a second, move in a second, have we? Councillor Peter and Councillor Sharon, all in favour? Thanks very much, Joe. Great. Right, councillors, we'll invite Don to the table, and 7.3, an update on where we are with Gabriel's recovery. Tararua recovery from Gabriel. Thanks, Don.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I take the report as read. I can expand a few things. Obviously, the task force screen now, as you know, has been in, your contract's now been extended to the end of November, which is really important because they have now done 15 farms, 22 are still on the books, but they cannot get to a lot of them, just something so wet. But they will believe they get across all those 22 farms before the end of November. We've obviously also got Tararua coming on the 25th. Unfortunately, we've had to change some of our branding around that because the National Party has picked up the same brand that we were using, which I see is now on all the blue notices around the district. So we've had to remove that. But apart from that, I can say everything's actually on time, on target, and we're pretty successful in getting what money is available. One thing I will say is the only hiccup we've got is that we applied for funding for the Dot Loves Data program, which I believe is something that will be essential not only for recovery but for council going forward. And then using that program, we can actually track how we are recovering community by community, because we believe this is a 3 to 5 year recovery program, particularly in the north, and you can track that quite clearly. And I think for businesses, it's going to be something that's going to be quite essential for them to understand how long it's going to take for people to recover from this. And not only that, we also know that now the lambing prices are falling, even though the dollar is falling at the same time, which is holding it up. But things are not looking financially good for farmers without Cyclone Gabriel at the moment. So on top of that, you're going to have a large impact on this community, without a doubt. And I just believe that the more data you've got, the more you can actually control things. Without data, you're always running behind the ball and trying to patch things up. We just don't want to do that. So if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to expand on these.
Councillor Sharon.
Thank you, Kerry. Not so much questions, Don, but I just wish to, on behalf of one of the bigger affected communities, to thank the work that is going on. That task force screen, although it took a bit to get off the ground, you know, in discussions with some of the farmers out there, there are still people that don't believe they need help, but yet the phone calls are being made and these people are turning up to help them out. The positive spin-offs for this program is at least 3 of the guys on that team are looking to set up their own fencing business at the end of this program. So it's been extremely well. There's been a lot of engagement. I don't think they've had any drop-offs. There's the odd day where Mike has said that, you know, they weren't on the footpath, Sharon, so I just drove on. But I think it's something that this team can be extremely proud of. If you were at the bogged in the swamp or whatever it was, there was a lot of farmers in there talking. That'd be true, Tracy, wouldn't it? Very highly about the application of this program and the fact that it was meeting a lot of the needs. And I know that with a meeting I held with RST the other day, there's some ongoing initiatives that I know, Don, you'll be aware of that we want to ensure go long past. So just a commendation to the whole team, Don. Thank you.
Look, it's really worthwhile having RST in the same office because you can hear the phone calls are going on. What is happening now is that neighbours are ringing on behalf of their neighbour who they see are struggling, but that person will not ring RST for help. And that's exactly what good community should do. And when you hear the conversation, it's not just around getting work done, it's also around mental health. Yeah. And they really are struggling. And look, I think I warned it last time that we really yet to see the mental health problems coming forward. They will, without a doubt, as people really realise that A, they have problems speaking to their bank, and B, their head down, backside up, and they're going slamming now, and it just will come down crashing on top of them. So the RST members are out and about checking on people that they know need help, but wouldn't ask for it.
For that, Don, I think it's fair to say anyone dealing with a rural sector at the moment is seeing the difficulties, especially with financially. And I guess the dairy auction last night with seeing another 6 or 10% drop. It's just ongoing, isn't it? Lamb prices falling and dairy prices falling. It's just making it difficult. But Don, just a quick question. Other than that, just on 4.1, I think we did discuss this, but the resilient works on private land and the reinstatement of critical water supplies on farms. Is it the funding of those? I was just wondering, I think we may have talked about this, but the funding of those matters, how's that handled?
I fund that applied for, which we received $1 million. And we've now got, most of you know, Mitchell Guile is now in charge of that program to make sure that it's up and running properly. And we're working with Lee Ransom from MPI. Who obviously knows this district very, very well. And the reason we got the funding is through Lee, I have to say. And also with Horizons, because we're about to start on the work on that. And there is that swell legislation, the weather event, in which you don't have to apply for a consent for like, but you should apply for consent if it's not. Usually 7 days, now it's been extended out to 60 days. Just been talking with Horizons today. They're more than happy to leave it to this group. There will be 2 independent assessors. And then we have a board that will sit and check each assessment. We do not want to put too many barriers in the way of people getting stuff done. And as you know, when a digger and a dozer on your farm, you'll suddenly find half a dozen jobs that you want done while they're there. And we were very much aware of that. Horizons are taking a view that it is under control, and they will be, the only time they'll step in is if there's someone doing quite a large amount of works, for instance, doubling the size of the culvert, and that flow may affect 2 farms down the road. It's the only time Horizons will say, look, we just want to make sure that the effects are minimal. Apart from that, I'm really thrilled at the way everyone's working together.
Thanks very much for that, Don. Council, everyone happy with that, Don's report? Wonderful. So Council, we could have a move and a second for the recommendation 1.1. Councillor Sharon and Councillor White. All in favour? Aye. Thanks, councillors. Thank you very much, Don.
Thank you. Apologise for the scruffy appearance.
You're welcome. Right, council's road and recovery. So Mark and Andrew. Floor's all yours. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to put in my apologies for being late. We were actually on site at the gorge, and our own traffic control held us up on the way through. It's good to know that we're no more special than anybody else, which is also annoying. We're just going in a soak on the way back as well, because we're trying to roll good for the corners. So my apologies for that. And due to those apologies, at the end of this, if anyone got any questions on the roading part of our main report, I'm happy to take them as well. So looking at the report currently, the main points I'd like to raise is that at the moment, we're now moving from a response works to more proactive and the planned. This will slow down what's actually happening out on site for a period of time while we're currently getting designs and that in place. At that point, some of those designs will come back to this committee and we will be working through some of those works that will be taking place in resolution to some of the more complex works. The other part is the funding that we're all aware of. We've now received greater funding from NZTA, which is gives us a far better security in the works that we're looking forward to. This will help us look at the current works that we're doing in restoring service, but in the future there will be discussions on that level of service. And by what I mean is that from A to B is the service obviously that we're providing, but in future when we actually look at those longer term works, we'll have to have a look at how that service will be in regards to what we're actually building back in some of those places. We're also opening up the gorge, fingers crossed, in 2 weeks' time, of which we'll be able to have some discussions and have a walkover on site. I found our walkover today to be quite enlightening with our comm staff. I think possibly in hindsight, I should have done this earlier. In them viewing the site and actually going through and meeting our contractors and seeing the complexities that we're actually dealing with, I think it's opened their eyes up as comm staff to be able to communicate and pass on some of those issues to everyone else probably a bit better. So I think in that, I think as a future learning for myself, I think people actually viewing and seeing some of the issues that are in front of us and then passing on information to our communities gives them a far better understanding rather than having the meetings that I currently have and then me passing on the information and then them passing it on. So that's something I have learnt from that today. And the other last part is the long-term recovery focus. And I think from this point going forward, it's something for our elected and our senior staff to start looking at. What is that? And I think we used the word reimagined at the Mayor's Task Force. And I think that's a point we need to start looking forward to, is in our future state in 2 to 3 years' time, 5 years' time, once we've moved beyond this, what are we actually going to be and how is this going to look? Now, for any questions in the executive summary, I'm happy to take them. And for any of the questions in regards to the actual physical works on site, I'll allow Andrew to fill us in. And some of the details have changed a little bit in the week that since between writing and now. And as explained previously, that's because things are rather fluid in dealing with things out there.
Thanks, Mark. I'll get a couple of questions first, and then Andrew can say so. Councillor Peter, Councillor Sharon, and then Andrew, if you like.
Thanks, Chair. Kerry. Yeah, Mark, is Waka Kotahi playing the ball with the Build Back Better idea in terms of increased resilience, or are they picky about that?
At this stage, those conversations aren't really taking place. I guess purely for the information of the room. I've actually been doing some research on Build Back Better. There's a lot of academic papers that have been written over a period of time. Build Back Better and resilience often is seen as building back something bigger, stronger, and more robust. Building back better can actually be building back something frangible that will break, but actually can be replaced faster. Building back better may be roads that are able to be kept open for longer periods of time, but may take longer periods of time to transit through. So the concept of Build Back Better itself hasn't overly been that well defined in my mind. But at this stage, Waka Kotahi, whilst Build Back Better is a saying, what it actually entails hasn't really been discussed.
quantified yet.
No.
Thank you, Chair Kerry. Two questions with your executive summary, please, Mark. Great news about the additional 34.7 million, but is there any money in the bank yet?
Well, we receive the money as we spend it. So as we're actually spending it, the money comes in, we claim monthly directly off that. So I won't say the faster we spend it, the faster it comes in, but the idea is to be able to claim as we go from our contractors' invoices, and if done correctly, I'm looking at Raj at the top of the table, if we can get it coming in as we're actually spending it, then the impact on us is minimal to nil.
That risk is managed. The only other question I have is, you've made a statement here, Mark, it's the end of page 31, coordinate their peers to ensure uniformity of approaches where applicable. What does that mean?
That takes several areas. One, obviously, where we're looking at access and how we're actually dealing with access and that to our communities. We've got obviously Masterton below us, and we've got Central Hawke's Bay. We need to ensure that how we actually deal with access and access to our communities is uniform basically across our areas. We don't want to be able to be doing anything too different. Obviously, having a higher standard is always good for the district, but having a lower standard to our neighbours, we would prefer not to. And also within that, how we're actually dealing with some of the works themselves. Obviously, we're looking at bringing in some engineering design and some of the resolution of issues. If we've got our peers who've already done some designs and done some work that we can actually, dare I say, pirate or borrow, we're all in one area in this. And so I think one of the areas we've probably lacked a little bit in is that coordination across the board on some of the resolution of issues. And we've got a whole country, I think there's 13, 17 councils on that are dealing with this. Everybody's hurting, and we really need to be able to work together as a, I guess, cyclone affected group. And how we put that together is yet to be named.
Because my next question is, what's your mechanism for?
Yeah, there isn't a mechanism. When Mayor Tracy and myself got to meet with Nicole Rosie recently, which for us, I don't love to use the word honour, but it's privileged for us to be able to have that audience. We did raise that point that there needs to be probably some leadership in that area to basically bring us all together. We're all looking for similar solutions to similar problems, and in my mind, doing that coordinated as a group gives us far more strength.
Thank you.
Raj, you'd like to comment, thanks.
Thank you, True Chair. Three things that I've noted here. One is following up on Councillor Ward's question about the funding. The funding has been approved and I believe is updated or entered into a tool that council uses, Waka Kotahi, which is called TEO. So the funding does appear. Finance does see the dollar there. And I think it's for us, it's a cash flow in terms of expense reimbursement, but the team in finance is working very closely with the likes of Andrew and Co and Mark and Matt to make sure that the claim is put through to us and put through the system, and we do get, and Waka Kotahi is quite efficient in how they reimburse council. So not a major issue for us in that space. Talked a little bit about, Councillor Peter, you raised about resilience. There is a conversation through the peers that I'm engaging with, in a sense that the government policy statement, the GPS, as they call the transportation policy statement, the current one that currently as it stands, which is what 3 years ago, it talked a little bit about climate change, and it focuses there. But now I hear that the current GPS is going to be focusing on resilience, which is great, and maintenance. They're going back to the fundamentals. So I think it's quite good. So the GPS drives, I guess, Waka Kotahi's direction and funding allocation, and also the transportation ministry's funding into the roading transportation network. So I believe it's quite positive that the government policy statement is going to reflect that. So I'm optimistic that will follow through. The last one, I think, Mark, you mentioned about the FAR. I don't know whether we have not mentioned in your report here, but do you want me to talk about the FAR funding assistance rate? So really good news. that we receive and
I hope we have shared that with Councillor White? Correct.
Please do. I was trying not to steal your thunder.
No,
It's an incredibly positive point, and it isn't in here because we'd heard unofficially through our own sources, and until it came through from Brian a few days ago, it hadn't been officially announced. But I think it's one of that and the 37 million funding, two incredibly positive points for this meeting.
so just for the public who are here in the room, the current funding assistance rates that we get from Waka Kotahi is 69%. For the next funding round, it's been increased to 73%. So it goes up by 4%. And what I understand from the sector is that there's a range in which the funding rate has increased. And the 4% is one of the highest. We're among the councils that got the highest increase in 4%. And the positive thing right across the sector here is that no council has got a decrease in the FAR rate. So to us, that's positive as a sector. That's really good news. And what we're doing is I caught up Mayor Tracy and looking at the finance and performance agenda. One of the items that we're going to include in that paper is an analysis of the impact of the increased FAR rate on council's funding. So we're going to talk a little bit about the good story that we had and what it means for us. So it's really good. 4% is huge for us. It's got a significant positive impact on us.
Just look at that going up to 73. The emergency works now with the plus 20 is now 93. There's only a 7% gap that we've got there for the next phase.
Absolutely.
Around 3 years.
Yes, it is.
The good news out of everything else, isn't there, from time to time? Perhaps, can I just ask one thing, Mark or Andrew, just I did make a comment on page 32. So we've talked about some of this with our roading, but both in this meeting and with in our task force of recovery, the Waka Kotahi uneconomic transport structural policy. I don't know, has that surfaced in that governance? Have we touched on that in governance? Not yet, maybe. Have we?
This is not something we've discussed yet, and it did come up in a meeting more recently on something slightly different. A lot of councils will have a policy in regards to infrastructure in general, and looking at the cost-benefit ratio, and which obviously also takes in consideration community use and the like. As we go forward with our roading and with not only obviously Cyclone Gabriel, but some of our more rural roads where they may not actually access properties and like, what we need to do is basically review our roading as a whole and see where the most benefit is and see basically the levels of service to that. We had a community meeting with residents more recently where we explained in regards to a road that hadn't gone to residences from us to be able to continue to maintain that road over a long time for the service level of heavy traffic and full public use may not be suitable. So then obviously ramping the use of that road back made sense. This may be similar across other roads, and it's basically a lowering of level of service to basically the economic value of the road and its use.
That's fine for that. Councillor Peter?
Thanks, Chair Kerry. Yeah, my understanding was that we're waiting to hear back from whomsoever or get a paper on uneconomic roads and or decommissioning them or levels of service on whatever roads. So am I right or wrong?
Chair Kerry, Councillor, I'm not aware of that yet. But then again, I've only been here a month, so meetings that may have taken place prior to me, I wouldn't be aware of. I definitely think that there is a need to look, and possibly not at a roads policy itself, but at a policy which is basically an overall infrastructure policy. In my preference, I would prefer to have a policy at a higher level that you can run various things through rather than bespoke just for one. But that would be a conversation that we would have with the elected to see. I would assume, don't like to assume with new elected, but you would prefer to have a conversation, a workshop around the formation of the policy prior to it being formed and put in front of you. If we would like to do that, I think it'd be a good point. And I think at this point of time, with where we are with Gabriel, where we are with the long-term plan, it'd be a very poignant time in which to do that.
Right, might just like to comment on this. Madam, thanks.
Really good, Mark. You're right, Councillor Peter. I believe we talked about it in the long-term plan with the president level of service discussion of transportation. We did say that we want to look at this, and I think there was, I would say, direction given to staff to identify, and I take on Mark's point, is to develop, I guess, a strategy or a policy that provides that guidance for us. So I think we can do that concurrently as part of developing the policy and bringing it back as part of the level of service discussion, including the policy would be what are the potential roads that we impacted by those decisions. So I think it'll be quite good for us to look at policy and the impact as well.
Andrew?
Yes, and just to expand on this conversation, it is pretty critical that this happens relatively quickly as well. We're expecting to spend potentially $15 million worth of emergency funding this year to rebuild roads, and the decision about where we're spending this money is pretty critical. On the playbook we've got right now, it's just that job's in front of us. If we're going to be building back better, looking at level of service, that direction needs to be starting to form early in the piece. Example, just to, I suppose, give a bit of context, is the Spur Road, which is out the back of Akatea, Marinega Portage area. It's primarily a forestry road, from my understanding. I've never been there myself. There's $2.8 million worth of faults that have been identified on there, as if we build that better. Logically, putting that in here, a conversation that needs to be had. So without that direction, it's difficult to know where to go from here.
Thanks, Andrew. Then just
Tracy, I was just going to comment, Tracy, we had a meeting recently, didn't we, with some farmers from the coast, and without naming them, 2 roads were discussed there. Mark, was yourself, Tracy, and so you took note of those, I think, but one of those was one of these roads, wasn't it? That was they were both discussed quite at some length between that, 9 or 10 farmers that were here. So there's obviously a few of these similar to that, Andrew, in the district, isn't he? So, Tracy.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. And we've talked to residents about tough decisions and tough conversations, and these are part of them. So I think it would be good, and especially if we get that framework correct. We've learnt some lessons in the 2 that we've already faced. I guess the one of the messages that I wanted to talk about was it was the government that talked about Build Back Better. When Waka Kotahi are referring to it, they're talking about resilience. I think the 2 are quite different, and I think we just need to, it may not, building back better puts in a person's mind that it's actually going to be better than what they had before, whereas actually reimagining it might look different, and it might be able to be fixed more often. So just that caution. Waka Kotahi are very much focused on resilience. It was the government that used Build Back Better.
thanks, Tracy. Any further grading questions, councillors?
Are we going into the table or
not? Yes, we can at this stage. We can go into we can go to page 30 to 34, councillors. Just the table of roads mentioned there by progress. Absolutely.
Kerry's trying to avoid my life, as he knows.
Oh, I know there's one that you might be.
Yeah, I'm very interested. So through you, Chair Kerry, perhaps to you, Andrew and Mark, given the trip that you've made today, I'm sure your eyes were open to the fact that that road is closed, and yet we have a car club that managed to go through that road and do so much damage. I understand we're a day and a half back. Now, this isn't the first time this has happened, and I guess I'm asking the consequences of having road closed and people completely ignoring those things. What are the consequences for that particular car club? Because I've seen pictures, and you would have seen it yourself today, of the level of damage, of great work that your team is doing out there. Absolutely fantastic. And it's absolutely gutting for the community to wake up and go and find that sort of behaviour going on. Will there be consequences for that particular car club for the damage that they've done?
Through you, Mark, before you answer that, I think Most people here are looking mysteriously,
Sorry, Terry.
including Stephen myself.
Okay, so, I mean, Mark alluded to the comms and I'll be pleased to see it improve, but if any of you are in regular contact with the Pongaroa community, they do and Mark Wheeler in particular does a post from the west, from the Western Front, he calls it. And so we have a local out there that's working really closely with the team, has a very good relationship. And he has been providing interpretations for the community on the work that's been done and sending out great photos. And there's been a real buzz around the great work that's been happening. However, in the weekend, a particular car club ignored the fact that the sign said road closed, whipped through that non-open road, of which a heap of build back had happened, and gouged, the photos, I'm sure you would have seen them today, completely gouged out a day and a half of work that the team had put in. And the consequences of someone outside the community just going ahead and doing damage to what is still a very fragile part of our roading network at Marananga. The road isn't even open, and a car club took it upon themselves to take a shortcut to Akatio Beach.
I'll take this one instead of Andrew, because Andrew's answer may be a little more fraught than my own, Chair Kerry. This is, if you take this to a slightly more holistic perspective, this is an issue that we have as a small rural council regularly. And we have a lot of things that happen in our district that we would prefer not to see because it works quite well. And hypothetically, if somebody removed a tree from a road and it was out in the middle of somewhere and we didn't have to get there, it would be a good solution for all. The difficulty in these situations is within this grey area, sometimes things can go awry. For example, if there were, I say were, locals who were transitioning through that road closed site semi-regularly under some guys that worked within the contractor and the locals, you could see that as a positive aspect. The difficulty is if that goes too far, for example, a large amount of stock being taken through, which then pugs up the site and then requires a couple of days rework, which puts us back, that would be obviously seen as a negative. A car club that was given permission to use certain roads that decided to possibly not use the route given for some reason and cause damage to a site, that is obviously a major negative. To enforce it strictly and barrier it off so no one can access the site would then obviously lose any benefit for those who are accessing through properly. This is a issue that we deal with on some of those rural roads, walking the line often. And I think that the discussions we've had today in regards to contact to said club in regards to damages would be a start. But there needs to be a conversation on what takes place in this instance, because if we took action on one, you would probably be required to take action on others, and you need to decide whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I know I've spoken around this a little bit, but I think most will probably understand where I'm coming from.
How was the local community out there today about it?
Not overly happy.
Mayor Tracy?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mark, I appreciate that you were talking around it, but I think I want to talk a bit more directly to it. And I guess this is some of the challenge that we might have of having informal rules when it comes to these things, is that when damage has been done, it can be more of a challenge, as you rightfully say, to follow them up. If the road is, in my opinion, if the road is suitable to be used in some circumstances, we should be listing what those circumstances are, and that should be an allowed access. I do think that we have to be very, very, very careful, because we have a number of roads that are still in a vulnerable space, to be sending any kind of signal that it's okay to be, I guess, picking and choosing and coming up with informal ways of working around. So I just did want to make that point. This is a public meeting, and I think it's an important.
I completely agree. And yeah, and I think for a public, Councillor Scott, I 100% agree, and I think having a way in which you can formally manage both is appropriate. It is a difficult situation when you're trying to do your best for your community, but at the same time, you don't want to allow what is their asset or our asset and what will be a delay to them in accessing it, be negative to themselves. So.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. I do have some concerns, and it's because this is the second incident. Otanga Road is also a closed road. We have had one vehicle go off the side of that road, and I'm quite keen to follow up. That then took in police time, fire service time. I'm not sure whether that, I haven't heard whether that person was okay, but also actually where do the insurance companies stand on this? So we've already had this happen on a second time, and I guess as a result of that, we now have additional staff time being used every single day to ensure that the road closed signs are there morning and night, as a protection for council, so that people can't say that, well, there was no signage there. So it is a continuing problem. Was there signage at Marininga Gorge stating that road was closed, and then what actions do we take, knowing how much damage has been caused? I mean, luckily no one was put at risk, but actually you've got a community that are already hurting. They're really wanting this road open, and yeah, they'd be pretty angry. I can understand that.
Councillor Scott and Councillor Steve.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's more just a quick follow-up to what I was chatting about before. And really, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I'm not suggesting that we're adding extra layers of bureaucracy for those communities that are already hurting. It's actually the opposite. It's if our roads are resilient enough to be handling some traffic under some circumstances, is that we make that known. Because otherwise what we're going to do, and it's my concern, is we're going to have people testing at the margins all of the time. So if a road is resilient and can be used at certain times or in certain conditions, let's just be really clear with people to try and make their lives easier. And then if people aren't following those rules, particularly large groups doing damage, we have the ability to actually come down with some enforcement action.
I hope we name and shame these people, because I'm sitting in this room. It's a lot of expense sitting in this room, and somebody to go out on the weekend and have a bit of fun for their own. So you're talking in tongues. I hate people talking in tongues. So I think it's a public meeting. We should name the people that did it, because they obviously had good intent and didn't give any about the people out there that have been trying to get through this room, all the work that you guys have been doing trying to get the road open. I mean, surely this is our benchmark is going down, down, down. We've got to cut this out. We've got to make it strong and be felt. You know, we're not going to tolerate it. And yes, name and shame them. Who was the car club?
No.
So that was, well, that's better, because you know, this is a public meeting. It might go into the paper and they'll go car club and everyone will think the Dannyburg Car Club. So it wasn't the Dannyburg Car Club. That's good. So somebody, this even makes it worse. Somebody come from out of town, right, out of the district, and thought, good, let's go and rip up Tararua. That's even worse. Somebody knows, because somebody saw those cars. Just do a nameplate check. It's not, that's why we call the army, or not the army, take that back, the police force, they call them. Nail them.
This car club conversation only
came to us basically when we were on site this morning. I'm keen to see the photos because we didn't actually see the damage that was caused. But I do know there was an application by a car club to go down Paitoa Pongaroa Road and down to Alfredton that came through. I don't know if it's connected to the same car club, but there is. I will go back and double check it to see if it was this weekend that it was planned for. So we might know who it, if it is, we will know who it is through that, I suspect. That's new, it's come to us today. So, and probably the biggest thing is this type of thing, it's around the health and safety risk, is where this is currently shouldered. If we were going through the various different faults on our that we've got out on the network, this list of single lane closed heavy, single lane only closed heavy traffic, it would be 3 or 4 pages long. Each one of those sites need active management. If we're starting to talk about greater restrictions on these sites, it potentially is things like traffic lights, and then having to manage the access to those roads out in a very rural part of our district, which we can't actively manage without the person, the Mark Wheeler, sitting there and seeing this car go through. The traffic, I suppose, looking back to the traffic lights that we had on the River Road site, being it's outside of cell phone reception, it was causing no end of trouble when the phasing would go out, and that's a hour's drive for a crew to go and sort it out. The health and safety around some of the risks we've got on the network right now is there. The risks associated with the dropout, and so the quicker we can move through, I suppose, into and we've got the $34 million right now. Our biggest objective right now is to try and make these sites safer, because when you've got half a lane road and we're getting rain that we're having through June, July, we don't know what's happening on these sites, and it may deteriorate overnight, and the road might have gone from half a lane to quarter of a lane type thing. So it's a very rural district, and the more information that we're getting from the public, the better, really. And I'm very grateful. I said we saw Mark Wheeler today, very, very grateful about him providing those regular updates, because as a manager sitting back at O-Ring, I'm thinking what's going out there this weekend, and Mark comes through with a photo and it shows us what's going on. So we've been trying to encourage the Ateno app, the use of that to report those things, and the more we can promote pictures coming in and just giving an update on the rural parts of our network, the better, really. So
Thanks, Andrew.
I think Mark probably hit the nail on the head in that you've got to use common sense and logic. And in small communities like that, a local with a couple of dogs on the back of his ute knows that it's essentially a closed road, but he knows that it's only because of a little drop out a bit further down, and he can get down to his back gate. That's okay, and everyone accepts that that's okay. But you can't formalise that in any sense. You just accept the reality of the situation. And I guess that's what you were talking about. And I agree with that. And the locals know what's what. But for a car club or for anyone else to scream through that, yeah, that's not on. But what do you do about it? It becomes a police matter. There's probably very little you can do about it.
Thanks, Mark and Andrew. Right, we're not happy, are we? But I'm sure that car club probably won't get through there again. It might be a hard ask second go next year. Councillors, you're happy with the agreed full voting report? I'll get some of the move and second recommendations. Nova and Peter, all in favour? Thanks, councillors. Thanks very much, Andrew. Mark. Great. Right, we'll have a chat to you. Thanks on your capital portfolio. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for your time.
Tile, Mike. Sorry? Thought you might have put a tile on.
Oh, sorry. No, I missed that one. Hold in your hand, Mike, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors. Cool, so I'll take the report as read. And I know as well that we've also touched on a lot of the projects that are also featured in some of the sheets throughout the discussion today. So if there are any further on the sheets, then I'm happy to go through those. Following the last few ones of these, again, we're going through iterations of trying to change up how we sort of portray some of this information to you. So going into this one, I've put a bit of some of the images anyway, should I say, for the project prioritization matrix, how that's looking. We've put into there the categorization as well, how that's going to be rolled out through. And I've given an insight as well into, it's actually mentioned today, was SODA, our project management software. So that's showing us the project count by state, current state. So that's showing all the projects that we currently have in flight. And that's also just showing again at what stage they are along the project life cycle. So if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to take them now, and then we can move through the sheets if that's acceptable to everybody.
Councillors, we just take this report and then the project sheets and just go around for questions. Councillor Garrett.
Thanks, Chair, for the comment. I appreciate, Mike, the thinking that's gone on to try and reflect more relevant reporting for us. Could not believe, put a big circle around 258 in-flight projects. Wow. It's so I appreciate the fact that you're tweaking and you're trying to present a picture which gives us a much more comprehensive understanding of this really key area. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. To be fair, that whole one there as well. So I've been doing at the start of each one of these, I used to cut out the different portfolios to try and split them. That there is a oversight of all of them. So the other part of this though is that this currently is only targeted capital projects. Yeah. So then when we look at it going into the future, we're going to have some bigger projects, in particular around the operational space as well, with the better off funding support packages. So I'm trying to, I suppose, capture the entirety of that, and whether or not it's worthwhile to see a snapshot of all programs and projects within this sort of forum and going forward, then I can do that. Or otherwise we can also look at, again, tailoring it out to the certain portfolios that these ones here are relevant to.
Thanks, Mike. I think you're going in the right direction for this area of our business. So you have the sheets, let's have a manual, or we're just picking it all up. We'll go sheet by sheet if you like. Then, so let's start on page 39, councillors.
Any fluoridation? Councillor Mike.
It's been brought to my attention that the fluoridation plant, a company is taking New Zealand government to court over this matter, and that is currently in the courts now. So I would suggest that we delay this project simply because we don't know the outcome in court. So we're going to spend time and effort and manpower. I would direct that labour to some of our other projects till the outcome of this court case.
I don't know anything about that, Mike, but Mike.
Oh, sorry, that's that one there is news to me, councillor. So I'll definitely look into it.
I personally think it's a good idea to throw it out anyway, so carry on.
Yeah. So apologies. So for us, yeah, the project has been mandated and we have been directed by the Ministry of Health. For this though, the way that I'd look at it was that we'd look into it at least and we could capture it as a risk and raise it through consideration process as well. So from here, it's definitely something to look into, but it definitely will require a bit more analysis on our end as well.
Yeah, I covered it off. We'll look at a risk perspective, and I believe, Mike, we have contracted the contractor to deliver this. We're still in a procurement phase.
So you can. Sorry. Yeah, so we are selecting a supplier at the current stage.
Crystal councillors. Councillor Field.
Do we know when, what plans there are to develop the site and start building on the Hillcrest site for Rangatani? We're spending a lot of money putting the infrastructure in. how far ahead or how far along the path are Rangatoni in getting anything built there?
I personally haven't seen the design work done from them, councillor, but I can definitely look into it and ask for how that they are progressing in that area.
Welcome, you Mike. Yeah, I'll just change my hat. To my investments point of view. There's a RFP currently out for consultancy design work to do master plans, urban master plans on sites. So the expectation is that somewhere around the middle of next year, there will be master plans finished in terms of the design for those sites, not just the Hillcrest Plateau, the Hillcrest Dam work as well. These things take time.
No, that's fine.
Thanks, Malcolm. If we can found the supply, I think we probably had a pretty good check for that, and councillors. Oh, Mike, sorry. Let's give you over that.
Just one thing onto that, just to also look at reducing, I suppose, some of our own workload. I know that it would actually go against some of the theory, I guess, within this sort of reporting being a high complexity program of works, but I'd make a recommendation that, well, currently we are, well, should I say, Roger is submitting regular reports to the council, committee meetings and meetings. So if in that, I could just perhaps just move this one out of here and it just features as a standalone point off to the side at the start of the report.
Yeah. Councillor Steve, to comment first.
Yeah, just a question. Who's your project senior responsible officer, please?
Well, no, for the impact supply, it was the, yeah, so the SRO for that at this current stage would be Roger and Brian going into it.
No, it's got Chris Chapman here.
And I see that, councillor, thank you. No, that is a clear error and it'll be rectified in the next ones.
Oh, yeah, no, because I know he's doing work in other districts. So hiding back.
Thanks, Steve. So, keep councillor. Oh, sorry, Tracy, did you have a comment?
Thanks, Chair Kerry. I don't have an issue if this goes because all other water documentation and information is being shared onto that one portal on the website. These are available for the public, but as long as Roger's reports are going into that website so that the public still have access to that level of information, then I'm happy if that saves some in removing that.
Councillor, Mike's suggestion is that that this particular item comes through to Mayor Tracy's the monthly meeting as well as this. Is that what we're sort of making an item on all our open public meetings? Is that what you're thinking, Mike?
I was just looking to reduce some of the workload to be fair in the reporting metrics for the impound supply. If we're going to be continuing with the regular reports that come through to both council meetings and infrastructure meetings, then instead of doing this sheet, that we just actually use those. If, however, though, that there is not going to be a scheduled one, I would say that we would look to present one of these to the infrastructure committee.
I agree.
You're happy with that? All right, Mike, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you.
Right, Denby wastewater treatment plant. Any chat about councillors? No, Paipua. Everybody happy so far with that? Data and telemetry upgrade. Councillor Scott thinking about that earlier. Yeah. That's happy with that. So, yeah. And then Councillor Scott.
I see that the budget's not adequate. On top of that, there was one this morning, some pump arrangement needed for the ponds as well, on top of the wetland itself. This is to do with the wetland, I take it, rather than the ponds.
I can answer quickly, the councillor, the one on the budget. So that one there is after our annual plan, we definitely have now solidified the budget lines for that. So that'll be an update into the next sheets as we go through. So that was okay from that point of view. I'm not tracking the morning's discussion about pumps. If I know Roger's here and Dave's here for these, so perhaps either of you two gents could provide some insight into this.
Before we move on to pump, Raj just got some discussion about the financial situation.
Just if you recall, as part of the annual plan, we did say in a consultation document that we'll consult separately on two projects. One of the Denver impounded supply, and the second was a Pahetua and Ekatuna wastewater treatment upgrades. As we firm up the projects and understand clearly what the costs are, we will then engage. I think that's what we're signaling here to say that the current budgets that's put in the annual plan, it's an estimate. And I think as the team works through and firms up what the project scope is, what the cost is, then I think we did indicate that we will look to go out and engage with the community on our options and finalize, and that will be a variation if needed for the current project. And I think that's what Mike is indicating here in terms of the current budget as we sit is not sufficient.
So we're going to consult with the community on the wetland? Surely not. We've done.
So this was for the wastewater and the wetland program works all over. So that part there, I know that we did go out to was in the annual plan process. We did consult as to an increase in the budget lines that went out with the annual plan process. So they were deemed as adequate at that time, in particular for our optioneering. So I know that we were waiting on those options to be finalised for both wastewater treatment plants.
I understand that how
questions in, Raj can so the mic and then Councillor Scott.
Through you, Chair. I'm a bit confused as well. Surely we can't go to the consultation now when the project's a third of the way through. Re-budgeting finance.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah. So can I just double check? I think I understood Mike, what you were saying, but the 6 million that has been agreed in the annual plan, that changes, I guess, the budget there. So that's no longer significantly exceeds that amount. Is that correct? I just want to really double check that.
Yeah, these sheets, to be fair, for the budget line there is not reflective of the ones that we've just had agreed on in the annual plan. So they will be updated in the future ones.
Is just to, I guess, a comment on this, and I know that there has been quite a bit of discussion about the amount of money versus the number of connections within the town. The amount is already concerning, but it's something I know we need to do. If, as Raj was talking about, it's still very much an estimate at this stage. If that is looking to go over that figure, I think we need to have a very, very, very early indication of that and have some quite serious conversations. So just wanted to flag that. If that estimate starts pushing out even further, we need to know quite early.
Yeah, Ray, and that was the intention when we went out to the annual plan and consulted to say that that is the amount that we have in the annual plan as per the budget. But once the project scope cost has been firmed up, and if it's significantly different, then it's got to be brought back here. And whether there's an ability for us to engage with the reason why we said we want to consult with the community for that project, Iki and Pahetua, especially Ekatuna, was the cost that we had in the LTP and the cost that we're forecasting now was significantly different in terms of the entire wetlands and wastewater treatment plant upgrade. And that's why we said that it will trigger our significance engagement policy. And that was the basis that we said in the annual plan that we will consult. And also whether there's options in how we design the treatment plant, not so much of the wetlands, because we have the budgets for the wetland. It's just the treatment plant, the links to it. And I think that's why we said that. So I think it'll be quite good whether we regroup to see where the design lands and how that compares to the current budgets, and if required, I think we just got to bring it back to here, and whether it's a variation or we need to consult, because that's what we said in the consultation document that we will do.
Tracy, if you don't know.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. At what point looking at these costs, you apply for a consent and then that consent comes through, you've got to meet these conditions, and then you're making the plans and the investment to meet those conditions. At what point do you consider going back and having a conversation with the regional council? Because the part that really concerns me with this consent is that it was only for 7 years. We've already spent 2 years. We're facing increased costs. We've got no guarantee beyond that 7 years. At what point do we have a sit down with the regional council and say, well, how's this looking? It is a very big investment to turn around in another 5 years' time when this is all ticked off and either reapply for the consent or what we might have to do there. It really does concern me with such a short-term consent. Pahiatura, on the other hand, got 15 years.
And how many connections is
Yeah, correct. So, for the number of connections versus the years and the investment, it's very challenging.
I can answer that, if that's right, Chair Kerry. Yep, sorry. Yeah, so just in terms of Mayor Tracy's comment there, Chris and I did meet with Nick Pete and Michael McCartney regarding this issue, as also with a range of other issues as well, to let them know that the costs of this have increased so much. And, as Tracy said rightly so, it's only for 7 years. Nothing that they would look at their level, but whether or not it needs to be at a political level, in terms of what the requirements are, that potentially could be an option as well. Hope that makes sense.
Good on you. Just Councillor Steve.
Yeah, could somebody just give me the definition of consent, right? When you actually start this journey, and obviously if it takes 3 years to get all the dots in a row, is that 7 years or whatever the term is, or 15, is that from the time you get the dots in a row and apply?
It's from the time they issue it.
You don't get your dots in a row first and then apply?
Not all, this one here went through the courts, so you can't get all your dots in the row because you don't know what the court might impose. So some of these conditions are imposed by the court. One did go the full way through the Environment Court.
Well, both Pahiatua and Ikitahuna see that some of the delays is because of the project manager. Have we got one?
We've got a project manager for Pahiatua, but not for Ikitahuna yet. Not someone dedicated solely to looking after that project.
If you wanted to, did you want to make statements about these projects before?
The advice we have had around one of the consents is that it's not worth going back to the Environment Court. I understand you'd have to go back to the Environment Court, and there's the risk, or one of the risks, on the basis of WSP's advice, is it could actually end up being worse than it is now. Because if I understand correctly, anyone can turn up at the Environment Court sessions and present their concerns in relation to that particular consent application.
Right, Chair Kerry, they do have to have been involved in the process and be noted. So it isn't just open to anybody. But I do recall some of the initial submitters to that. One of the suggestions from those submitters was composting toilets. I can't tell you who all the final people off the top of my head were in that process, but it's not open to everybody.
Leader, councillor Scott.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. Has the line for the pipe from the ponds to the wetland, has that been surveyed, and or is it going to be surveyed, or has it been surveyed, and is there a right of way attached to that?
No. Can I look at Dave for the other?
The initial part of, so when Tonkin and Taylor were doing the design for the wetlands and the pipeline, that process was then, the pipeline was then shifted to WSP when they took over the total wastewater treatment around the district. But yes, there will be a easement through the property. I haven't seen the final draft of where the pipeline goes or the design where that goes. And the pump station that was talking about it in this project sheet is to get the waste discharge from the treatment plant to the wetland. So it's that pipeline. So it's a pumping station through to the wetland.
And second question. I see that the work on the wetland is on hold. Is that simply because of the weather, or?
Yeah, definitely, councillor. I was down there 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we know how wet it is everywhere, and it's very wet on the golf course. And yeah, there's no way we'll be putting any machinery across the golf course. I don't really want to get into any big discussions with the golf course over what you think, but yeah, we'll just be monitoring that as we go along. When we do get it dry, when it does dry out, we will then be able to make a start date or set a date for that. So it's just weather bound really at the end of the day.
Scott, sorry, David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Look, this is one particular project that has never sat incredibly well with me just because of the cost to benefit. Totally understand that it's through consents and it's something that we need to do. I think that really with some of the discussion and some of the other risks that we talked about earlier on in this meeting, I actually think we need to go back and have a look at what else we might be able to do in here. And if that's a discussion about composting toilets or what we might actually be able to do. And I appreciate that these things potentially will move away to a new entity in a couple of years. But as a ratepayer, it makes me feel uncomfortable, and it certainly makes me feel uncomfortable as a taxpayer or as a water user as well. And I just wonder if this is an opportunity, because it does concern me with that short consent time and then the precedent that it might set to some of our other settlements. So yeah, it doesn't sit well. And I don't know if there's another way.
Certainly been a discussion around this table for some years, and it's been nothing but a cost centre, a huge cost centre, actually. But
Mr. Chairman, can I ask that question of WSP, who advise us in terms of consents, and what options we have? We can come back to council if that's what you'd like us to do.
Might do that, councillor. Oh, sorry, Mayor Tracy.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. I think that would be a good idea to talk to WSP around that. And when we applied for that consent, we're looking at an existing plant and we're keeping, adding on to meet compliance and adding on. A new entity might look at that and say, actually, that was built there and, before that town grew, it's not got any chance of meeting the future environmental regulations. What would a greenfield look like? And that's something that a new entity has the ability to do. So I guess that's a question that we could ask of WSP without, plunging further money into it or having that conversation. But if you could find that out, I think the time to do that's probably now.
Right, just comment.
I agree with what Roger said. I think we have the consent in front of us, and that's the consent that we have to give effect to. And Brian did mention that he and Chris had a good chat with Horizons as our regulator in this instance, and I think for us to have an option, for example, suggested here, composting, which totally deviates from what the consent requirements are. It requires what Roger talked about, to go back to the Environment Court to change the consent decision. So that I think will be quite difficult for us. But I take on what Roger said. The idea is that we talk to WSP and look at what options do we have, and what options can we explore within us achieving the outcomes or the conditions that are in the current consent that we have. And I think this is what I think we did say in the annual plan, that as part of Paetua and Ekirahuna wastewater treatment plants, we will look at options in us meeting the consent conditions. For Paetua, I think the cost increases, and we had options. I think the cost increases wasn't as high as annual plan. So we think that for Paetua, there wouldn't be a requirement for us to consult with the community, because the cost that we see in the LTP is quite similar to the cost right now. It's only a Ekirahuna treatment plant where the cost has more than doubled. So I think what the team might do is go back to WSP, look at what options are available for us, and bring it back here. That be.
Before we start on that, Councillor Knight, once.
Just further to that conversation, I know at some stage there was pricing done on pumping that to either Paetua or even Masterton or wherever, and it wasn't feasible then. However, circumstances have changed, and so that pricing now could be different. So it may be economical to pump it to another station now.
For those councillors, prior to the elections, we did get quite a full report from WSP on options to pump sewage and water all over the district, from Northwood at the other end, in both directions, centralise it at Woodville, centralise it at Dannevirke, and different various options. And that's, it might be worthwhile pulling that back onto the table just for councillors to have a look at some stage. But just Raj, just your comment, just the Paetua wetlands and upgrade. Was I wrong? The approved budget, the original budget was 1.5 million. Is that now in the red? We're now at 6 for that. I slightly missed that one. Is that the pipe? When we got to the annual plan stage, were we at 6 then? Were we? Maybe I'm just missing something.
I jumped in around landmark on make something like,
So we're going to have to readjust how this budgets ones look. The new system that we are moving to actually ties it into our financial system, so it actually won't have any sort of ongoing, I guess, adjustments that need to be continued to be made against this. Again, as per the annual plan, we'll actually have to adjust that again. So these figures are in the red there, and I know it's obviously caused a bit of concern here. We'll readjust it again for the future reports. The project management part of this, I'd just like to say, I suppose, that again, these projects are all considered outside of our BAU. So that whole part there is why it's been a struggle, I suppose, to have absolute dedication to a project, in particular these largely complex ones. We are, hiring though for a Three Waters project manager as well. So we are actively recruiting for that. On top of that, I suppose one other risk, and I suppose a consideration around that, is that I know that both of these are having optioneering done on the wastewater treatment plant. So I'd suggest that we continue on with that, as that while we can have the discussion with WSP about it, I would say that it could potentially go south if we were to come back to the table and say, put on hold all of that other work. They may just come back and say, no, that is a 7-year consent is the time frame. So then we've effectively lost that. That would be my consideration for time against the projects.
So what your suggestion is, Mike, here, carry on with the optioneering for Ekirahuna and both?
I'd suggest that essentially we're just going to have to increase the amount of work that's been put towards us if we're to approach those other further conversations to WSP.
continue with optioneering and then chat to them about options for Ekatahuna maybe.
You know, I don't think there's any concerns at this point around Pahiatua. That seems to be reasonably clear the way ahead. And my apologies, I think that's an error, that $6 million, that shouldn't be there. Ekatahuna is the one that is much more uncertain, and we're not clear on the process. And until we're clear on the process, we won't be clear on exactly what the cost is. So I think Ekatahuna is the one that we should be seeking advice from WSP on as to what our options are moving forward.
Thanks, Chair Kerry. Yeah, thanks, Roger. And Mike, my gut tells me that the cheapest option is to continue the way we've planned. Any other option is going to be infinitely more costly than this. The fact that this is unbelievably costly relative to the number of users is somewhat beside the point. It's what the option is, and we don't really have any other options. 50 years' time, the decision to pump to Pahiatua, for instance, may have proved to be the right one, but I don't think it is right now. I think we have no other option but to continue with this.
Councillor, should we leave that where it is? Get Roger to have a conversation with WSP about Ekatahuna, and we'll talk at the next meeting. Is that where we sort of should leave this? But carry on with optioneering. Okay. Right. Agreed on that. Sort of, everybody. Thanks, councillors, for that. So the last, we've got quite last. We've got Woodville footpaths and then Weeble. So anything, ask Peter, no doubt. I would like to get what you think right now.
Gary, my understanding is that this has to be done by June of next year to qualify for the funding. Is that right, Andrew? And it's budgeted to start in October. How these things happen, that Jack's away and it's said and his mother died and it's January before it starts again. It worries me that it won't be completed.
On top of our Roof 2 upgrade and our Cyclone Gabriel response and every other thing that's going on around the district, my team have been very, very busy working in the background to get a expression of interest completed. That's been done. We had 6 contractors come forward. We shortlisted that to 4 contractors. We've just gone through an RFP process which closed on Friday, and I haven't had the results of it yet, but hopefully come the end of next week, we have a contractor in place ready to kick off in October. It's a design process. One draft they've seen so far, which is
one man and a dog, or is he got
well, the one I'm aware of is a reputable company. The other one is also a very one of the other ones is also a very reputable company based in Palmerston North. And there are 2 that were, one was from Taranaki and the other one was based in Christchurch. So hopefully come next Friday, I'll be able to email you saying we've secured a contractor and we're pretty much things are moving.
You won't need to get your heart head on.
So Peter, you'll be able to sleep easy.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, and Raj.
Just to add, Andrew answered it really well. Just to add to what Andrew talked about, as part of the procurement, they are aware of our timelines. So when they tendered their proposal, they do know the timelines in which they need to deliver. And what Andrew said, the shortlisted contractors are well known and high level of confidence that they will deliver. And I'm sure his team will project manage that.
Thank you,
Just to expand on, it's the pump track bike park that will be the one that needs to be moving quickly, because that's also got a deadline, and those type of things can take a little bit of time to get off the ground. Building footpaths easy, building pump tracks not so much, particularly if it's going to be on the EMA previously.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Steve.
Oh, no, you want to do Wimbledon first? Oh, got something else.
Anything with Wimbledon, councillors? No, that's tracking on, I think. Give it a bit of a stop raining and almost getting too cold out here. Councillors.
Yeah, just while I got David in the room, through you, Mitra. How's the council room down there? Open and running?
No, it's not. So tomorrow morning, the alarm getting connected up. That's the last thing to be done. And then I've just got to walk through and tick all the other boxes that we had to complete. So I'm pretty confident that'll happen tomorrow. And then we will work out when the transition of getting staff and everything back in there from then. So.
Right.
Yeah, well, it'll just be organising everything to go back into the office. How we're going to. It's not a huge transition, don't get me wrong, but it's probably just me trying to plan and get a few bods to actually lift everything back in and get rid of the containers and just tidy up the mess. So, 2023. Yeah, I mean, give us two or 3 weeks. Hopefully, everything will be back in place and everything will be operating out of there. So,
Okay, to the side. Thanks, David. Thank you for that report. So councillors could have a move and second for Mike's report. Thanks.
I'll second.
Councillor Slot, Councillor Steve, all in favour? We've just got one matter to go into excluded, but me, Tracy and Scott, if you'd like to sneak off to the next forum. Thanks very much for your attendance. Yeah, so we just have to go into excluded business to do some minutes from last meeting. So we have a move in particular. Someone moves, Councillor Erina and. Yep. We'll go into excluded business. All in favour? Thank you. Councillors, we can just. Oh, thank you.